Hello, everybody. My name is John. I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Hey, John.
Well, we are going to be talking about the No Relapse Monday. And I don't really call it relapse prevention because I don't believe I prevent relapse. I believe that God has done this for me. I believe it's a gift. I also have a pretty strong belief that the minute I think I can keep myself sober is probably about a day or two before I take a drink. I say that after a lot of hard-won experience with some relapses. Today, what we're going to be discussing, which is a little more in-depth, a little more advanced information, is what Dr. Harry Tiebout had to say about relapse and how it affects us and how it comes on. Now, who Dr. Harry Tiebout was, he was on the board of directors of Alcoholics Anonymous for many, many years. He was a leading psychiatrist, and he tried to inform us of quite a bit. Now, I'll be frank with you. There is a school of thought out there that anything that's beyond the big book is possibly dangerous information for you to learn. Now, that's not how that tradition got started. It's not dangerous. It's just there is a tradition that for about the first year, since most people really need to get this deal, and they really do need to pretty much memorize as much that big book as possible, you want them reading the big book for about a year before they get into a lot of other material. Because, after all, it is so tempting to start reading more books, and some people get really wild with it. You know, they'll have 15 different books that they're reading, and they don't really get the benefit of any one of the 15. The big book is such a foundation for our recovery that we pretty much need to put off everything for a good long time to get that book absolutely memorized. Because it's not a self-help book. It's a book that's designed to work 100% of the time to get a person recovered. And there's no other book that's going to really do that in a short enough period for us to avoid a relapse. Though we know that the big book was based on the Bible, particularly the book of James, and a lot of study in the Bible. The reality is there's a lot of stories in the Bible that are wonderful and important stories for us to learn, but they really don't have much to do with recovery or preventing us from going back out. That's why we don't start people out with the Bible. And that's why the big book came about. Is, if you read the story of Adam and Eve, let's just say it's your first day, you're trying to get recovered. It's a wonderful story. What actual tools have you gotten out of that are something you can take home that evening to prevent you from getting drunk again? Well, outside maybe an inspiration, you really haven't gotten any down-to-earth information. So that's why we've got the 12 steps, we've got the tools, and we've got a process. I know that's a long explanation for how important the big book is. Today's one of those days where we're going to study a little bit of other information. There are two major signs of relapse, according to Dr. Harry Tiebout: defiance and grandiosity. We're going to define those two terms. Defiance, we kind of all know what defiance is, right? Let's go around the room and just briefly discuss defiance. What do you think your definition? We'll start with Jesse here. Just real quickly, what do you think your definition of defiance would be?
Resistant, unmoving.
Okay, pretty good. Resistant, unmoving. What do you think, Brian?
To go against, the grain of things.
Okay. What do you think?
The act of rebelling.
Rebelling. How do you feel about that, Ross?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of something different than what these guys have said, but I really got the root word defy. To undermine.
To undermine. Excellent.
I would say it's refusal to comply.
Okay.
Stubbornness.
Stubbornness. What do you think, Jacob? Okay.
Open resistance or bold disobedience?
Okay. Bold disobedience. Well, everybody has a pretty good idea, and I would say all of those definitions are certainly accurate. If I were writing a sentence on a piece of paper, I could use any of those definitions to convey that idea. So, if you got any of that, you're probably on your way to a relapse. Could it be that simple? I'm being rebellious. I'm probably going to go use some more dope. I'm resistant. It is that simple.
When I looked at it, and I thought, defiance equals resentment.
I'll have a question and answer here a little bit later in the meeting. Yeah, defiance. Let that soak in for a second. If you are defying anything about this program, you're probably going to die with a needle in your arm or a drink in your hand. Probably not so long either. Could it be that simple? It really is. It's really that simple. All that you have to do to be able to determine, am I doing good or am I not doing good? Is ask yourself that one simple question. Am I being defiant? Grandiosity. What is grandiosity? Now, we're not going to go around the room on that term. But grandiosity is an inflated sense of what I deserve. More grand than what is really necessary. Not to say that some people don't deserve abundance, and we certainly see it all the time, that people are blessed with abundance, and they're very prosperous, things like that. There's nothing wrong with those things. But to feel like I'm entitled to it. Tell you what, Cole, while I'm talking here, would you like to look up the actual Webster's definition or definition of grandiosity?
I just did. It's an unrealistic sense of superiority.
Okay, would you like to read your definition?
Yeah, it says an unrealistic sense of superiority.
Okay, slow down so I can hear you.
An unrealistic sense of superiority. A sustained view of oneself as better than others that causes the narcissist to view others with disdain or as inferior, as well as to a sense of uniqueness. The belief that few others have anything in common with oneself that can only be understood by a...
Okay.
By a...
So we have a really good idea. Do you feel in any way superior to other people? Guess what? You're probably going to die with a needle in your arm or a drink in your hand. How do we know that? Well, I'll just read to you a little bit of what Dr. Harry Tebow had to say. Defiance may be defined as a quality that permits an individual to snap his fingers in the face of reality and live unperturbed. It has two special values for handling life situations. In the first place, defiance certainly with alcoholics, is a surprising effective tool for managing anxiety or reality, both of which are so often a source of anxiety. If you defy a fact and say, "It is not so," you can succeed in doing so unconsciously. You can drink to the day of your death, forever denying the imminence of that fate. As one patient phrased it, "My defiance was the cloak of armor." And so it was a most trustworthy shield against the truth and all its pressures. I'm sorry about having a little difficulty with that. I'm reading this real fine print on this little bitty phone page here, so it's a little difficult in its reading. So,
A shield against what?
a shield against the truth and all its pressures.
Okay.
And so, what it's really talking about is something that we perceived as a survival tool. To defy people, to defy the truth, to be in denial about the truth, is a perceived survival tool. Well, grandiosity, he goes on and expresses this way. Grandiosity, the second quality noted by Silman, permeates widely throughout the reactions of the alcoholic. Differing from defiance, which seems almost uniquely structuralized in the psyche of the alcoholic, grandiosity springs from the persisting infantile ego. As in other neurotic states, grandiosity characteristically fills a person with feelings of omnipotence, demands for direct gratification of wishes, proneness to interpret frustration as evidence of rejection and lack of love. The effect of this persistence in the alcoholic is not a bit different from the effect of any other neurotic. Perhaps in the alcoholic, the typical arrogance and sense of superior worth are kept nearer the surface by the associated defiance that feeds the childish ego constantly by its succession of victories. By and large, however, there is nothing in the alcoholic's grandiosity that distinguishes him or her from the neurotic, whose infantile ego survives to become a significant factor in the adult life. It is part of the typical egocentricity of that group, and its presence is confirmed by any careful study of them. That was Dr. Tebow's way of saying it. Now, I'm going to put that in just some real plain English. What it's saying is we're extremely childish. So let's look at what's happened here. And I want you to listen real close. Your life may depend on these words. When we were about 2 years old, we discovered the ego. You'll notice this in your own children. At 2 years old, they go from being little kids to mine. They'll say that about certain things. Well, that's where we start individualizing ourselves from other people, which is a perfectly normal thing. In fact, it's very important to understand I've got my own hands and my own nose and my own body. I am separate from mom and dad. 2 years old, it's appropriate time. Now, as we're moving forward in life, with the alcoholic, as you know, we have these genetic differences. And at about 4 or 5 years old, we find excitement. Perhaps we get a toy or some kind of item that's really exciting to us, and we equate that to happiness or joy. Well, at that point, we've decided very early in life, at about 4 or 5 years old, how we're going to carve out happiness for the rest of our lives. We've made a 4-year-old decision that it's going to stick with us until we die. And that is, if I get the things I want, then I will be happy. Which is okay for a 4-year-old. It's even okay, perhaps, for a 10 or 12-year-old. But once you get about 14, that's supposed to change. Somewhere between the age of 14 and 17, if we're actually healthy-minded, we realize that we've gotten a lot of things that didn't bring us any type of permanent happiness or joy or satisfaction. Are you with me? We're supposed to recognize at about 14 to 17 years old that the most important thing in life is the ability to control our emotions. Now, that's a natural human development. Unfortunately, many of us, particularly our alcoholic and drug addict friends, never develop. What happens is, instead of finding a method by which to control our emotional natures, we just continue on a path of, if I get what I want, then I will be happy. Because we don't know what happiness is. We know what excitement is. You know, like when I get that new bike or that new motorcycle or that new car, that's exciting. I equate that to happiness, but that's not happiness, it's excitement. And they're very different emotions. But I've never known happiness, so I don't know anything else. The one characteristic that we alcoholics have in common is we're all about 14 years old in our maturity. We're all immature unless we get past that. Now, that's the very thing that allows us to sober up. Is a natural conversion from being the 4-year-old that made life decisions at 4 to being the 14-year-old that starts realizing that, you know, life's going to take me for a ride. I'm not going to be in control of life. I'm not going to manage life. I'm not going to be able to wrest satisfaction, as the big book says, out of life by managing well. Well, the surprising thing is we act like that's news to us. You know, at 30, 40, 50 years old. Wow, I'm not supposed to be trying to manage life and wrest satisfaction out of it. Wow, that's a hard concept for me to grasp. Here's what's interesting, is it's supposed to be as natural as the 2-year-old discovering he's got his own hands. There's something happening in my own theory in our society that is possibly promoting people to have this excitement and not mature. But that's my own theory. I don't know why there are so many people that are grown men and women that have the mentality and maturity of teenagers well into their 30s and 40s.
So you're saying, pardon me, they're just stuck mentally, emotionally, 17 years of age?
Well, I'm going to do a question and answer. If you'll make some notes for yourself here in just a minute, I'll go around the room. I'll say in just a minute. It's actually going to be a few minutes. So, why in the world would we want to grow up anyway? I mean, now that's the big question right now. Is there any advantages to this being an adult stuff? Well, I'll tell you what, I get a lot of defiance when I talk about it. If you want to know the number one area that I find defiance in is this transition. It's actually called the conversion. And they've been calling this since some early psychologists, for example, the book, The Psychology of Religion, identifies this as the conversion process. Dr. Tebow, in this document, written many, many years later is talking about this conversion process. And we know in our churches all over, they've been trying to convert people for a long time. Did you know what the conversion was? The conversion is not to grasp a hold of a slogan like Jesus saves. Though Jesus does save and He is our salvation, that's not conversion. Conversion is when we convert from that idea that I seek excitement, to realizing I need to control my emotional and spiritual nature. Grandiosity. So if I combine a grandiose thinking with a immature personality, I'm a 15-year-old, I'm grandiose, and now I'm in a 30-year-old man's body, do you think I might have some problems? I don't even have to be an alcoholic for that to create problems. I don't even have to be anything but just undeveloped as a human to have problems with that condition. Now you go ahead and add on some genetic problems that we have as alcoholics, a craving for alcohol once I put it in my system. I've got real problems. Now, if you take a moment and think about what we just said, you realize that there's a lot of work ahead of you. Or you can say, I'm going to be defiant to that concept, and I'm going to go about living my life with the same attitude and mentality that I developed when I was 4 years old. I'm going to get what I want, and somehow through enough excitement, I'll be able to blot out the reality of my existence, facing life successfully by blotting out what's really going on. Well, the next thing on the board here, as we go through the board, there's a quote. It says, "You must give it away to get it." You've heard in AA, you must give it away to keep it. Do you need another sheet, one of these? You can have as many as you want. This is Chris Raymer speaking here, and I trust Chris. Just virtually anything Chris says about AA, you can count on it. I mean, I've never found anything that I disagreed with him about. However, I mean, I'm sure if I listened to him long enough and hard enough, I probably could. After all, I've got a little Defiance streak in me. All kidding aside, you must give it away to get it. Now let's think of some ways that we can give away the product of what we're receiving. Well, one way is to sponsor people or to actually be mentors of other people that are suffering from alcoholism, drug addiction, or even just the immaturity that we're talking about. If you run across somebody that's, let's say, a 50-year-old attorney, that his biggest excitement in his life is buying a new home or a new item, and that's all he knows, well, that's somebody that's probably very immature. That's somebody who's still a child, even though they're in a 50-year-old body, they've been well educated, they went to law school and everything. You're actually interacting with a child. Wow. When you sit down and talk with them, with all their wonderful education, you're talking with a 15-year-old boy. You're not talking with a man. Wow. Oh, now here's one that's going to get you, gentlemen. Guess what? When you're talking with a girl that's 40 years old, that her goals are about money and not goals. You know, we have monetary goals, but when her sense of success and value is based on this excitement of material things, you're talking with a 15-year-old girl. You're not talking with a full-grown woman. You're talking with someone who has not made the normal progression of human development. That sheds a whole new light on it, right? Have you ever thought about that? That, yeah, they might be a 40-year-old woman in body, but a 15-year-old woman in maturity? There are a lot of them out there, men and women. So don't kid yourself. Do you want to be a complete man, or do you want to be a boy yourself? Do you want to be in a 50-year-old man's body and be a boy? Or do you want to be a complete and full-grown man, an adult? Well, for me, I began this process of actually conversion at 47 years old. I've had a lot of money and I've had a lot of successes over the years, and I've had 2 marriages and I've had 8 children. So, I mean, I've had all the things people consider adult. But I'll tell you right now, I didn't start growing up until I was 47. I didn't understand that getting what I wanted, when I wanted it, had very little to do with what life is about. Okay, let's go around the room real quick. Based on what we've shared, what is life about? We'll start with you, Jesse.
What life should be about?
What is life about? Just as quick as you can. If you can't think of anything, just pass.
Go ahead.
Loving God and loving your brother.
Spiritual growth and maturity.
Okay.
Learning how to love, live, forgive, help others.
Okay.
Helping others rather than focusing on what you want. Selfishly.
Love. Love, I think, is good. Loving other people.
Love. Okay. What do you think?
Help people in need. Be responsible. Family.
Okay.
It's life is like a balance of a bunch of things, but say if you want to be successful or you want to have a family and stuff like that, those things are important. But in order to be able to be content with those things, once you get it, you have to be able to control your emotions. Like, you have to be content with where you're at, even if you don't have anything. And a shortcut for people like us to get there is through a higher power, be it God or Krishna or whatever. As long as you rely on a higher power, you know what I'm saying, that higher power will help you attain contentment even in bad times. You know, the economy goes down and stuff.
Really good. We've talked a lot about love, and I love that word. And what Matthew said here is most detailed description, and it was all very true. What he just said is just in the event that my stock market crashes and I have a bundle of money in there one day and not very much the next, that I can get through that and get on with the business of life and realize that this is a temporary setback in the economy, and whatever that is, I can make that up. But what's important is that I don't go in and chew my wife out and fire a couple employees and have this miserable, months of misery over how I was wronged. That if I'm emotionally sound, I realize things like that happen in life. Jacob, did you have your hand raised a minute ago?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe out of the, and that I didn't want to be ignoring you if you did. Oh, okay. So Matthew's exactly right. And that's the maturity that we're supposed to develop between 14 and 17. Now, I suspect, and again, this is just my own theory, so take it or throw it away. It's just what John is saying right now. You don't have to look at this with the authority that you would the big book or something. But I suspect that the way humans developed, just a century or two ago, we didn't have all the comforts of life that we do now. If you were going to go somewhere, you either had to ride an animal or you had to walk. And it was slow. If you were going to travel across the country, a lot of times you didn't have a road. You had to chop down trees and bushes all the way, and you might be lucky to make a half mile a day, while you're chopping brush to get your wagon across the country. That's pretty tough stuff. So I think a lot of what life consisted of for so many millennia before our 20th century is a situation that forced us to recognize that if I'm going to have any happy moments, it's not going to be based on how convenient my life gets or how comfortable my life gets. I'm going to have to learn how to be happy chopping wood. I'm going to have to learn how to be happy with life on life's terms. Not to sound cliche about it, but life on life's terms. Well, today there's a big school of thought that's out there. Again, this is just my own, according to John, kind of stuff. That happiness is going to be obtained by looking better than your fellow man, having more comfort than your fellow man, showing off how great we are. Oh, that's grandiosity, isn't it? There's an actual society out there telling us that if I make you feel less than me, then I'm doing good. And that how you feel like, let's just say old John pulled up in a really nice, whatever your favorite car is. Corvette, a Lamborghini, or a Lotus. Man, and I mean, it's shining. It's a 2017 Lamborghini. And I pulled up tomorrow in it. What good's that going to do you? It's going to make you feel less than, maybe like a failure even. Wow. Well, how did that guy get that? Let's say Brian pulls up in it, 23 years old. Pulls up in front of the house. Hey, what's going on, guys? Look how cool I am. What is he doing? For us or for himself?
Being narcissistic.
I'm sure there's a bunch of names. That's one of them that you could label that with. But at the end of the day, he's actually accomplished nothing that we just talked about around the room. Helping other people, benefiting. Yes, Ron?
Douchebaggedness.
Oh, yeah. We needed to stop the meeting to hear that. Okay. There's just not to say that there isn't a place for that kind of thing, but when that's our main goal, what we're really getting is the wrong information. We're think of the world and its people as a school. And we're teaching a lot of the wrong lessons. That unless you get things that you don't need to impress people you don't like, you're not a success. When you put it in those terms, you start getting down to the reality of it. That's just not true. Are nice things good? Well, sure. Nice things are good. Can nice things benefit people? Absolutely. If we're very, very compassionate, very, very loving, and we're willing to show someone how to get happy and stable-minded and willing to help them out, great. But think about this also. When I pull up in my Lamborghini, and let's just say I'm the same exact person I am right now. I've got all the loving heart. My number one goal is to help other people. And, my thing is to be of good use to my fellow man and God. But I did pull up in a Lamborghini. Would that help or hurt my ability to help you?
Help.
It's a program of attraction.
Depends if I can get somewhere fast.
Shows that you got it all together.
Yeah,
Well rounded.
right. And you know what?
I mean,
The average. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, at least seemingly, especially to someone whose mind is still processing worldly views of things, they're like, oh shit, that guy needs to be my father.
That's true. I want what you got. Could be, could be an attraction. But in many ways, it could work just the opposite, just as quickly. It'd be like, well, yeah, I'd be happy too if I had a Corvette.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why you're so happy. Huh, look at that wife you've got. Yeah, if I had a wife like that, I'd be happy too. Yeah, and I mean, you're expecting, yeah, you can come in here all jovial and happy and wonderful. Look at what you got. Big old house over there. Timeshare out in the Caribbean. 2 very nice cars. Yeah, I'd be happy too. Yeah, I'd want to stay sober too if I had all that. See, when you're dealing with the newcomer, that a lot of times is the attitude, right? Because they think if their life is just a little easier, that they wouldn't need to drink. You know, you could say, well, if you had my wife, you'd drink too. If you had my life, you'd drink too. So in reality, there could be some benefit. We discussed it. Somebody could want what we have. On the other hand, it could absolutely destroy our opportunity to help someone.
Well, that's on them.
Is it if they die?
That's their attitude.
If they die, that's their problem?
Well, no, not if we're supposed to be having. Are we supposed to drive around in a 1950 truck because?
Perhaps.
That's a badass truck.
No,
You know,
I'm just saying. There probably is a reasonable level of what we need, what we can use that makes sense without having grandiosity.
Oh, okay.
Remember?
Grandiose delusion.
And I'll be frank with you. Anytime we say it's on them, when we had the ability to save a person's life, we may want to do our own checkup from the neck up, since our whole function is to dedicate our life to helping others.
You can't control jealousy in other people. You can't control, you know what I mean? They could be jealous of your sobriety. They could be jealous of you helping other people. I mean, that's kind of hard to control.
Well, we're not talking about jealousy. Jealousy is another thing we might have a discussion or meeting on. What we're talking about here is, yeah, if I had that car, I'd be able to be sober too. That's not jealousy. That's just a belief that the reason you're sober is because you got all those goodies. And you wouldn't believe how many people at the meetings actually have those ideas. Just to reiterate what I mentioned a moment ago, tons of people come into our groups that think that it's because of the lousy life that they have is the reason they drink. Now, we know that's not true. We know that they could be a millionaire in the biggest mansion in town and all that, and they'd still be drunk. We know that as experienced people in recovery. They don't, though.
Say it again. Tons of people think they're allowed to have a lousy life because they drink.
No.
Because they have stuff.
No. What I said is there are tons of people that think if they had a better life, they think they wouldn't drink. You know, there's a delusion going on. Let me give you some of the things that go through our heads as alcoholics. Well, if you had my wife, you would drink too. If you had my difficulties, you would drink too.
Materialism acts as a buffer. That's what they think.
Well, we're going to do a question and answer here. We keep forgetting that part. So write down your questions, and we'll cover them here in just a couple of minutes. We're almost at the end of the board here. It says, this is a statement that Bill Wilson made many, many times before there were any really official AA groups going on, we had like one group at the time of people that weren't even called AA. They got together. But Bill Wilson was on a train. He'd been offered a job at the hospital. How many of you have ever heard this story? Okay. Well, Bill Wilson was broke, right? And he gets offered a job at the hospital to be a counselor at Towns Hospital, at National Hospital. And he's on the train and he's praying. Listen closely. He's praying about whether he should take this job or not. And words come to him and says, right out of the scripture, every laborer is worthy of his hire. And so he's absolutely sure that he's worth this money. So he gets back and he's talking to the group, a group of people about like you. And he says, man, I got this chance to get a new job. You know how I've been really strapped on cash and not doing so well? I'm going to have a job as a counselor doing what I do. And the group said, hold up, Bill. We don't think you should do that. You need to do this for free. After all, haven't you told us that good is the enemy of best? So, Bill, here's how awakened he was. He listened to the group, and he didn't take the job. Am I willing to do what Bill did? To stay sober? Yes, I am. I haven't asked for any money or a paycheck in 3 years. I don't plan on it ever again in my life, negotiating some hard-won deal with anybody. I hope I never get in that position that I have to do that. I understand some people do, but I hope I don't. And you know what? I haven't had a want for anything during that time. Because, see, I've got the best. I've got the best recovery. I'm not over here under that 4-year-old or 14-year-old delusion anymore. I don't suffer from that disease. If I get just the right material possessions, that somehow I'll arrive at my oasis. I realize the oasis is nothing more than a mirage. I'm able to get in reality. That's cool. I live in reality. I was able to take a lot of situations and wrongs that I had done in past, and instead of hiding from them, step up to the plate and be willing to take care of my legal, emotional obligations. That was not easy, but it tells me to do that in the big book, doesn't it? You've got to be willing to do whatever it takes, whatever lengths we have to go to. Well, in the process, I've had to trust God an awful lot, and I've gotten to enjoy something I never enjoyed before, and that was sanity. I've gotten to enjoy sanity. Sanity is when I do have control over my emotional nature. Does that mean that I sit here and just force myself to have control? Oh, I'm not going to be angry. I'm not, No. What it means is I have a process to control my emotional nature. I have the ability to remember immediately to call on God to help me. I have the ability to sit down and talk with somebody. I have the ability to make amends if I have slipped up and hurt someone emotionally or physically. I haven't hurt anyone physically in many years, but in any way, if I have harmed anyone, I make amends quickly. And I always have my mind on who I can help. If I'm not actually sitting down helping someone, I'm thinking about how to become more effective at it. I may spend 1 or 2 minutes a week thinking about me. And I don't even like that. Because it's insane, sit around thinking about me. It drove me insane. I'm not saying you don't have to plan out a vacation or some calendar time type stuff. Sure. Manage your time a little bit. Sitting around thinking about me and the outcome and worrying about this, that, and the other. I don't have time to spend my life doing that. Well, that's all I have on that section. What kind of questions do you have that you may have written down? I've seen some hands go up earlier.
Well, a good job. I mean, good is the enemy of the best. Good meaning a good job is the enemy of the best recovery possible.
Yeah, well, you hear it all the time. Oh, he's got a good program. That doesn't mean crap. He should have the best program because just by virtue of having a good program, he's settled for something far less. He's eating crumbs when there was a whole loaf of bread to be eaten. That makes sense? You know, Bill Wilson didn't take that temporary little job that would have paid him enough to pay his rent and everything, because guess what? The best was writing a book that changed the world. Think about that. The best. This is the best. Bill could have been just like any of us. He was just like all of us. He could have just said, well, this is good enough. I'm sober. I'm going to talk to some drunks at this hospital. That would have been good, right? He would have died. We would have never heard of Bill Wilson. We wouldn't have had this book. And there would have been some people that sobered up. You and I probably wouldn't have been in that group.
How is that not grandiosity?
I was gonna say that.
Okay. How's what not grandiose?
That I'm not going to do what's good enough to stay sober and help just a few people out. I'm going to write a book that's going to change the world. I'm going to start a revolution. I'm not just going to be a drunk. I'm going to be the best drunk.
Well, you know, if that was his evil, diabolical scheme, I don't think his mind was working that way. I think it worked probably more like this, is, no, I'm going to turn down that job, and I'm going to go ahead and suffer without having any money for about a year and a half here.
Or the group's right, and I'm going to die if I don't do this shit.
Yeah, the group is right. I'm not. That's a good one.
Couldn't you still help those people at that place for free, though? Instead of just turning the job down? Because those were people that didn't
Well,
need
he did.
help.
That's exactly what he did. He turned the money down and helped the people for free.
I'm sure he was already helping out
well-
there. That's why he got offered the job.
Okay, so he turns down the money, turns down the job, and he would go in and help those people, some, but he also traveled around helping other people. And once he had gotten at a point that there were several people, well, actually it's 100, that sobered up, they collectively got an idea, we should probably write this down. We've got something pretty special going on here. So they documented it. And then the book did change the world. I don't think he set out with that kind of plan initially. So,
And if grandiosity is kind of immature selfishness, then that would be the total opposite of immature selfishness. Wanting to get out of yourself and write a book that may or may not do good, but I don't think that was. I think you wanted to help people. That's it.
I think he wanted to help people. And, you know, and I'm not saying he was a saint, and he never held himself out to be a saint either. But I do know his focus went from a self-centered, what's in it for me, kind of, what can I get today concept, to what can I give. And that's why, of course, you must give it away to get it. For example, if you're not actually doing some things to give this thing away, then you're probably walking on some fairly thin ice. Now, I know Josh is doing some things to give this away. For the last 2 Tuesdays, he's carried on classes here. I know that Cole has carried on one on Friday and one yesterday evening. Just our workshops. I know some of you are working with other alcoholics individually. But if we're going to get this deal, we have to give it away. So that's the main thing that you're going to want to look at right now in your life is, am I able to take this message and carry it to others? So, in summary, the two major signs of relapse, as you see on the board here, are defiance and grandiosity. We know what those things are. Well, you must, as it says in quoting Chris Raymer, you must give it away to get it. There are a lot of reasons behind that. One of them is you're not going to remember how to stay sober unless you start thinking about from the angle of how can I show someone. Your mind is just not going to absorb enough information because as a student, we retain 5 to 10% of the information that we get. When we start thinking like a teacher, we retain 80 or 90%. It's a huge difference. So just for your own, on a completely logic level, you've got to try to give this away from a teaching standpoint in order just to remember enough about it to stay sober yourself. Or you're not going to remember enough before your next relapse. So that's real important. And good is the enemy of best. If I say this is good enough, then I'm not getting the best. And I don't think your or my Father in heaven wants us to just have a good enough kind of life. But I think He has the best life for us. Don't take that, filter that through your American training there. The best life for some of us might be living in Russia, teaching Russians that are alcoholics how to sober up. For others, it may be living in South America and teaching people down there how to sober up or just help build houses. For some of us, it may be living in the inner city in Houston. Some of us, it may be living on an Indian reservation and helping them.
Living on a mansion.
Well, no. And for some of us, it may mean, being the next big business tycoon because we're going to help a lot of people out in employing people. Big employer that manufactures things.
A mansion filled with alcoholics.
No.
Yeah. That's a big sober house you're talking about. So we don't really know what the best is. Other than we can get a pretty good idea, it has a lot to do with helping other people out. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and call it a meeting. Are there any last minute questions? Okay. Hello everybody, my name is John. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Well, we are going to be talking about the No Relapse Monday. And I don't really call it relapse prevention because I don't believe I prevent relapse. I believe that God has done this for me. I believe it's a gift. I also have a pretty strong belief that the minute I think I can keep myself sober is probably about a day or two before I take a drink. I say that after a lot of hard-won experience with some relapses. Today what we're going to be discussing, which is a little more in-depth, a little more advanced information, is what Dr. Harry Tebow had to say about relapse and how it affects us and how it comes on. Now, who Dr. Harry Tebow was, he was on the board of directors of Alcoholics Anonymous for many, many years. He was a leading psychiatrist, and he tried to inform us of quite a bit. Now, I'll be frank with you. There is a school of thought out there that that anything that's beyond the big book is possibly dangerous information for you to learn. Now, that's not that's not how that tradition got started. It's not dangerous. It's just there is a tradition that for about the first year, since most people really need to get this deal, and they really do need to pretty much memorize as much of that big book as possible, you want them reading the big book for about a year before they get into a lot of other material. Because, after all, it is so tempting to start reading more books, and some people get really wild with it. You know, they'll have 15 different books that they're reading, and they don't really get the benefit of any one of the 15. The big book is such a foundation for our recovery that we pretty much need to put off everything for a good long time to get that book absolutely memorized. Because it's not a self-help book. It's a book that's designed to work 100% of the time to get a person recovered. And there's no other book that's going to really do that in a short enough period for us to avoid a relapse. Though we know that the big book was based on the Bible, particularly the book of James, and a lot of study in the Bible, the reality is there's a lot of stories in the Bible that are wonderful and important stories for us to learn, but they really don't have much to do with recovery or preventing us from going back out. That's why we don't start people out with the Bible. And that's why the big book came about. Is, if you read the story of Adam and Eve, let's just say it's your first day, you're trying to get recovered. It's a wonderful story. What actual tools have you gotten out of that are something you can take home that evening to prevent you from getting drunk again? Well, outside maybe an inspiration, you really haven't gotten any down-to-earth information. So that's why we've got the 12 steps, we've got the tools, and we've got a process. I know that's a long explanation for how important the big book is. Today's one of those days where we're going to study a little bit of other information. There are two major signs of relapse, according to Dr. Harry Tebow: defiance and grandiosity. We're going to define those two terms. Defiance, we kind of all know what defiance is, right? Let's go around the room and just briefly discuss defiance. What do you think your definition? We'll start with Jesse here. Just real quickly, what do you think your definition of defiance would be?
Resistant, unmoving.
Okay, pretty good. Resistant, unmoving. What do you think, Brian?
To go against, like, the grain of things.
Okay. What do you think?
The act of rebelling.
Rebelling. How do you feel about that, Ross?
I'm trying to think of something different than what these guys have said, but I really got the root word defy. To undermine.
To undermine. Excellent.
I would say it's refusal to comply.
Okay.
Stubbornness.
Stubbornness. What do you think, Jacob? Okay.
Open resistance or bold disobedience?
Okay. Bold disobedience. Well, everybody has a pretty good idea, and I would say all of those definitions are certainly accurate. If I were writing a sentence on a piece of paper, I could use any of those definitions to convey that idea. So, if you've got any of that, you're probably on your way to a relapse. Could it be that simple? I'm being rebellious. I'm probably going to go use some more dope. I'm resistant. It is that simple.
When I looked at it, Defiance equals resentment.
I'll have a question and answer here a little bit later in the meeting.